You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, everyone. Sarah Box, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about breaking through limiting labels and beliefs. Did you know that 3.7 million new videos, or roughly 500 hours of video, are uploaded to YouTube every day? Why? Simply because videos are powerful. A video becomes an extension of an organization or a business, and it can tell people who you are and exactly what you offer. Not necessarily like scripting it out, but you get a feel for an organization, for its family of staff, for what it does and the difference it makes. You get that through the richness and texture of video in a way that you don't just from the written word. And videos also give you an opportunity to share and highlight what you can do from a very heart-centered perspective. So as we enter the last quarter of this year, nonprofits are preparing for the year-end fundraising push, hoping to meet or exceed the financial goals that will then allow them to serve people and communities into and beyond 2023. And it's a volatile time right now financially, so it's important that nonprofits get the support, as it's important for solopreneurs and small businesses who want to differentiate themselves so they can stay relevant into the new year, especially in our economy. So to help our listeners break through limiting labels and beliefs about being an effective video storyteller, someone that moves others to take right action, we're revisiting an episode from April 2021. And my co-host or my partner on the episode is Ken Fay. He is an Emmy Award-winning writer, director, and videographer. And thankfully, I can say this, he's a member of our team. And this episode helps simplify the storytelling process behind your video. You know, the video that you haven't yet created, but you want to, and you're going to. So as a heads up, we talk at the end of this recording about a course that we were offering in 2021. We're going to be offering a different version of that in 2023. It'll be a longer series of classes. But Ken and I decided to offer a 90-minute, one-day intensive, plus an optional VIP session where you can actually go into a smaller group and ask questions, give examples for feedback, and then Ken will also make himself available for a capped number of organizations who want to spend an hour with him to look at what they've got going on or their concepts after that. But what we want to do is do this one 90-minute intensive heart-centered storytelling course. It'll be in November. And if you want to be notified when we open registration, be sure to email us with the subject line HCS Intensive 2022. Just email us at sarah@sarahbox.com with that subject line. It'll be in the show notes so that we can make sure you get notified when we go live. Now with that, let's have some fun and get into the process of effective videos that tell your story. Hey there, this is Sarah, No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about breaking through limiting labels and beliefs and taking away any excuses you might have for getting going and going after what matters to you. Today on the podcast, we're bringing back a guest, a friend of mine, a co-teacher of mine, a gentleman that I respect and have so much fun with, Ken Fay. Now, Ken and I are going to do a series of shorter podcasts for you, and we're specifically doing this to engage folks who are trying to tell a story, to have a narrative that moves people from being in one position or potentially being stuck or needing help, or maybe you need donors, but moves them to act, to take action based on a heart-centered story. And there's a path for doing that. And Ken has developed a 3-stage piece that we now teach on. So over the next 3 podcasts, we're going to dive into that. And why is this important? Because as my friend Ken says, that we are in a narrative evolution. And I'm going to let him talk a little bit more about that. So Ken, just hop on. How you doing today?
Hey, Sarah, good to see you again. How you doing? This is great. Yeah, so where is our story right now? Where are we in the story, right?
Well, it depends. Where's the beginning and where's the end? So
Exactly.
am I feeling hopeful because like I'm in the beginning and I know this is like the setup and you're freaking me out? Or am I, where are we in this story?
Yeah. And that's the truth, right? I mean, everyone has a story to tell. We've said that before. And, honestly, there are really just 3 parts to the narrative. And when you understand each of those parts, that makes the impact. And by having a heart-centered storytelling focus, you can move through those 3 parts and move your audience at the same time. And so, like, as you're saying, today we're going to talk about setup. How do we set it up? How do you set it up?
Okay, we'll talk about that. And then I just had a question come to mind that I'm not going to ask you now because it will derail the conversation, but I'm going to write it down.
Okay. And a good storyteller doesn't get derailed. A good storyteller doesn't get derailed.
Yeah, no. Oh, well, I don't want to put too much pressure on you. All right. So let's start. Why do we even tell stories? You see this more and more. People are saying we're telling a story. Are stories useful?
Yeah. I mean, our whole life is a story. So you just put yourself in your most comfortable chair you have in your home. Just sit there for a second, close your eyes. What's happening in your head? You're replaying something. It's a memory, it's a story, it's a conversation. It's already happening within you. And that's what we all do. We all replay or play stories and narratives in our head. Now, those narratives sometimes are the ones we tell ourselves and we happen to believe, which could be right or wrong, right? And some of those narratives are other narratives that you've heard about or you're still trying to figure out, or maybe it was the book you read last week or the movie you're going to see tomorrow. Whatever it is, you're telling yourself a narrative. It could even be about, what am I making for dinner? That's a narrative. And when you link those little stories together, it creates this life narrative that we all share. That's the human experience of it all. And so when you link those things together and you have that narrative, you start to realize that we share a lot more with each other than you think we would, right? And our life experiences, our human experiences, right? Just on this planet, we're constantly going back and forth in our narratives with each other. So we are writing our own and we're writing others. Whether they know that they're a character in our book or not, we're writing their story as well. So the idea of all of this is to then put that somewhere. And if you put that into a heart-centered narrative, you can then make a real impact on the stories that you're telling. And so that to look at it that way, whether you're selling your business or you're selling your organization, or listen, if you're just selling an idea about where to go for dinner, all this becomes something that you can utilize in your life.
So this is the question, and that you set it up perfect for me. So we're telling stories, right? And I love where you left off, even if you're trying to convince someone or telling a story about where to go to dinner, right? It's like, I have a thought and I want you to go there, right? But I have a question for you, Ken. For me, I'm wondering, because sometimes when I'm stuck or I don't want to get up and work out, I don't want to do that, right? I make up a story, it's like, okay, but the Sarah you really know, the Sarah who's there, she's waiting for you to get going, right? But I have a different narrative I run. And if I run it just long enough, that's what happens, right? I transform the maybe 10 minutes from now into, God, let's do it right now. Let's do it. Does that work?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It works in everything in every part of your life. So what you just described, you went through the 3 parts of the narrative within a second. The setup was that you're lying there in bed going, so you set up this scenario, where you were, what you were thinking, what you were feeling. That's all set up. You're the main character in that narrative, right? Whatever it is, that's the setup. The turn was like, but that's not the Sarah I know. That's the turn moment where you're like, I got to do something about this. And transformation was, I'm going to go do it. Let's go work out. And you get up and you go. Within a matter of seconds, you went through all 3 of the narrative. And that's exactly what you can do. And you could do that stretched out longer or shorter. You can have a bunch of narratives fired at the same time, each one on a separate part of that track. And again, it's just
say more about that, Ken. So As someone
Yeah.
who likes to single track rather than multitask, how would you have multiple narratives running?
Where there you go.
Tease
So
that out a little.
yeah, sure. So it could be in the moment where you're like, do I want to go work out right now? Or do I feel like I just want to sit here? At the same time, you have another narrative that may be saying to you, I had a conversation with my child earlier today. They're going to get home from school and I'm going to have to finish that conversation. That's also running in the background, but that's still in setup mode. You haven't even got to the turn in that conversation yet. And then you have the other one is the further one out is, I have a big project coming up tomorrow. I've been working at it for the last week. I think I've got it. Oh, but I just need to do that little bit more. Well, that's another stage of the narrative on that story. Now, all three are happening at the same time to you, and they're all programs running in your head. And so which one do you tackle first and how do you tackle it? Now, here's the thing. One story narrative can influence the next one, which can influence the next one. How many of you have woken up in a beautiful morning and said, what a day. The breeze is right. The birds are singing. I feel like I can do anything today. That's a different narrative than waking up that same morning with a bright sky and say, oh, I got to go do this thing and I'm not sure if I can do this and I'm not prepared for that. Same day, same setup, different characters being played out, same character, same person. It's the narrative you're telling yourself, right? It's like a mindset thing. Honestly.
Well, it's absolutely a mindset thing, which is one of my favorite things, right? In being strategic, is like pick the one that's going to serve you best. And the one that's making like, oh, I got to do that thing today. Just changing is like, well, the character I want to be is one who says, hey, I get to do that thing. And worst comes to worst, I'm going to learn something from it. Right.
Right on. Yep.
Exactly. Don't have to love it. Right.
Right.
But can do it. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about, first of all, let's frame our conversation a little bit. Who are we talking to when we're talking about a setup? So like if you were teaching a class, who would you be teaching? Is it anybody, a particular group right now, or so that folks can go, okay, I could see how they might apply it or I might apply it?
So who you're teaching with a class like this is you're teaching anyone who has a mind that wants to tell a story. So even in our recent classes, right, Sarah, we had people say to us, they approach projects differently after taking this course. They were able to say to themselves, I have another way of asking the question. I have another way of putting out my idea. I'm thinking about it now from the viewer standpoint. So as we tell our narratives, this kind of a thing is important to anyone who wants to tell a story, right? So if you're an organization that has a message that for a campaign or a series, you need donors or you need to get out your information, you need a call to action, you need something out there, then this is going to help you get to that point, right? If you're also, but also as a secondary thing, it might help you in your life where you're like, I need to think differently about my day and what I can do in this day. I need to be the hero of my own story. You can do that by understanding the power of story.
And I think also as a leader, right? If you have a narrative that can help engage and strengthen your team or the individuals you work with, that's a powerful story to develop. Will it be on video? Maybe, maybe not. It might be in writing, it might just be in conversations, but you have your framework, you have your setup, you know who your players are. I won't go into the other pieces of the framework because we'll do that in the future ones. So basically what you're saying is storytelling, we all do it, and it influences all of us.
Yeah, storytelling is life telling. It is, it truly is. It's our life. And what better thing to do when you sit down with a bunch of friends and just, what are you doing? You're telling stories to each other. Where you were this last weekend, what you did last year. Oh, I remember we were on that trip together. It's all narrative. It's all story. It's our connection to each other. It's a connection that with people you know, but listen, it's a connection to people you don't know. How many stories have you seen documentaries, for instance, which is something that I love to produce? Documentaries have an impact on you as a heart-centered story so that you see the world a little bit differently, maybe through the eyes of the person that was featured in that documentary. And it opens up your mind to a larger conversation that's being had in our world. So narrative and storytelling, it's not just something we did sitting around fires. I had said one time that, storytelling has been around as long as mankind, right? It's true. It's so true. So at one point we were telling each other what was going on, right? At another point, we decided to write those tellings on a cave wall so that other people could see it and not forget it. Well, then we started writing things on parchment paper, and we wanted to write things on clay, and we wanted to tell our story even further and further and further. So now we have the digital transformation and everything is online. We are in the parchment era of that digital transformation of storytelling. There's going to be more than this and ways of telling our story. What we're doing right now may feel like those cave drawings in hundreds of years. There'll be other ways to tell the story, but what won't change is the human heart, the human connection, the human experience that's shared through that story.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about the setup. Now, I've noticed, I can hear the same story. You get around friends, the same group of people, maybe you only see them once a year, or a couple times a year, and the stories that are going to be told, right? Because they're the same stories and it's the same people telling them. But honest to goodness, I get sucked in every single time. So talk to me about the setup. What's happening when people start to tell a story? What are the components? Talk to us about the components.
Sure. Yeah, easy enough. Setup is that moment where if you're sitting with a bunch of friends, we'll use that as an example. Someone says something that's familiar. There's a word or a line or a place. Well, words, faces, and places and feelings and texture and stage and whatever it is around you, the environment is your setup. That's what's setting you up, right? So if we had this beautiful time together, say in an island somewhere, and I mentioned the name of the island, oh yeah, we went to that restaurant. Oh yeah, didn't we meet that waiter there? Oh, he was so fun. Now the setup is happening because in your head, there's an art and a science to this. The art is saying the right things at the right time and getting that enthusiasm. The science underneath all that, though, is you're starting to re-experience that moment where you were in that restaurant with that waiter and you had a moment on this island somewhere. You're actually feeling it. In fact, if you were to gauge your neurosenses, you would actually those same neurons would be firing for remembering. And you might even smell the smells, the taste, the sound, and all these things start to filter in. So suddenly, yes, we're sitting on a porch somewhere, but now we've actually transported ourselves in our mind's eye to that very place and restaurant all those years ago. That's all set up. And that's what you do with a story. You set people up and you bring your audience and you put them right there in the midst of it all. That's the setup piece.
So give me an example. Let's say we want to do a setup. Let's just do a setup for a course, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I'm trying to get really practical. And
sure.
So for folks who don't want to be out on the theoretic, it's like, let's just drill this down a little bit. So we want to tell people the benefits of storytelling, examples, sure, whatever. How do we begin? Where is the beginning of that? Like, we're not around a campfire.
Right. You can always imagine that campfire. No, so drilling it down, you would start to really say to yourself, what is my why? What is my why? What is the why of my organization? What is the why of the message I want to give? And what is the response that I'm looking for? Who am I talking to? Who is my audience? You have to define a few things before you set down and start to create. So I want to create the canvas. Now the canvas is the colors I'm going to use, the textures I'm going to use, the brush strokes. In this case, it's going to be the words I'm going to use, what I need to pull from, what are the challenges that myself or my organization faces that I need to overcome through story? What is the message points that I need to include in this story because it's branded and it's something that's always been a part of our organization? How do I put all those pieces together? That's all set up material. All right. That's your clay. Okay. That's your paint. That's your canvas. It's the places, the faces, and the spaces. All of this is your setup. Once you have that gathered together, almost like a giant crew call, right? You have a giant crew call of talent, right? Once you have all those things gathered into that creative box, then we're going to start to work out, well, how do I move that forward, that narrative? How do I make that to go toward the turn? What do I incorporate now, immediately? And what do I let set out there as I move along to allow my audience to come up alongside me and see it the same way I do, so that when they get to the end, they've transformed. That's setup.
Okay. So setup is very intentional.
Yes.
Yep. You need to know who you are, what your motivations are for telling the story. We're not talking about campfire stories. Well, know who you are. Your motivation is to have attention and have some fun. But for an organization, who are you talking to?
Right.
What's your purpose in telling the story? Then you set the stages. You've got the places, the faces, and the spaces that set the feeling, and the
The feeling,
texture.
the texture, the tone. You want to start to develop what is the overpulling narrative thread? What is that overarching narrative thread that I'm going to pull through this needle, that my audience is going to follow me wherever I take them on this story arc to get to the end? And you're going to filter that with different things at different times. So pacing is a part of it, but you want to just pull in those important facts and figures, right? If you're telling that sort of a message, and wind them around each other with some sort of, and we call it a vehicle, with some sort of a vehicle that helps carry your audience through to the end. You never want to lose an audience member along the way, right? Everybody stay inside the car, right? Be safe. You want to pull them through with you to the end. So by the time they get to the end, they've experienced your message. They haven't just heard it, they've experienced it.
So it really is to take something that's just out there in your head and bring it, like we're talking about, make it heart-centered.
Right. Focus it. So it starts in your head. You need to bring it to your heart. You need to figure out all these parts and feelings about it too. I know there's emotion attached with storytelling, right? And it can hit you in different ways. And so you need to balance that part out. But once you bring it to your heart and you center it out and you're like, okay, this is my message. I got this perfect tagline. This is going to make a reaction to the audience that I've defined, that I need to now work toward, and that respond back, right? And that's done in a myriad of different ways too. That then goes back to more of a cerebral approach of like, now I'm going to use the methodology of figuring it out so that I can pull this string forward. And then when I do that, they'll be coming along with me. And then I get to the end of the ride and they're still with me. So it's a lot of factors put in. Some people do it naturally. Other people really have to think about it. And for others, it's like a whole different language, but it's not any different than anything else. It's engaging in the human experience and keeping that center, because that's how we connect. It's finding connection.
So it is something you can learn with practice, right? It's
Yeah.
not a mystery. Some people, like you said, some people it comes by naturally because that's how they're wired and how they think, but you can learn it.
Mhm.
So Ken, we talked about the setup. In our next episode, we're going to start talking about the turn. So I don't want to go into the turn today, but I do want to just pause for a minute and let's talk a little bit about the course. So I know folks listening may be really interested in this 6-week intensive course that you and I will start doing a little bit later this spring. Let's talk a little bit about who that would benefit, what the structure is, just kind of our vision for it, because we've walked through all of this.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
to start sharing a bit?
Yeah, sure. It's interactive. Storytelling is not a one-sided thing. It's not me talking to you. It's a conversation, right? And so this is a very interactive course. We want to hear back from our students, right? I mean, that's where you get the feedback. That's where the creative energy starts to spark from, is there is ideas and the forming of those ideas and how those ideas form, and then get them right down into a format that can be utilized for each individual's person's purpose. And that's part of what we do, is we help guide that walk. We are like, I would say we're like librarians looking, going through a library of all these tomes of stuff, but we kind of help guide you as a storyteller to get to those points so that you're writing your own story, that you are writing your own story. And we're just along with you to help you, to guide you in the writing of that story so that you're hitting those points and you're thinking about all the angles that go along with that point to make it easy.
So I want to share with you, the listeners, that when the last time we did this, we intentionally capped it, the size. We're capping it again for the exact reason that we want to have special attention so that you can do your work. Ken and I will come on, we'll have conversations around it, give coaching. Not only that, the other people in the class give, oh my God, such great feedback, because they'll see something you're trying to say and someone will come and say, well, this is what I got from that message. And if that's right on, then you go, perfect. And if it's not, you're thinking, that's not what I was trying to convey. So you get really great feedback, right? Also, to the point of one person who was sharing some feedback, another person was watching this because we're doing it remote, like most of us are, the world's working right now. Another gal says, I think I've been where you were. I just wanted to throw it all away and start over again. Don't, you're really close. Right. So the encouragement that came with working in these small groups, it was great. But I did want to tell you personally, that I was just on a session today where once again, this really short video, one of our cohort members made for their organization, she was asked to present countywide to directors, right? And because their organization on behalf of this collaborative had made this short video, it was in the presentation. Super well received. Now, this was made by a gal who is not a videographer. She teaches and she coaches people, and, but this is not her quote unquote bag. So she and a partner did this and it came out great. And what was so fun was going in, folks in there thought, I'm not sure I've got the skills or can do it, but it was so powerful. So Ken, what was one of your favorite takeaways from that?
That's what it is. It's actually working with the clay, as it were. I love that for any storytelling that I put together. It's working with that clay, but then watching this beautiful statue form. And in this case, with this individual you're speaking to, they came a long way. It's like, it was confidence building, it was story building, it was narrative building, and it was changing for them personally and professionally. And now that organization has a message, a focused, intended message that wasn't there before. It's that magic of creating something, but it kind of is. It's that creating something that wasn't there before that now you put out into the world. It's fantastic. That's the stuff. That's the stuff.
So folks, we'll have, if this is something that sounds like it might be good for you, I'll just give you the high level. It'll be over 6 weeks. There are 5 core lesson areas. Let's just call it that. They're not just lessons, but it's teaching and conversation, interaction with you in the class. We are limiting this to 15 organizations. That's it, 2 people each. And we're doing that again intentionally because Ken and I both want to make sure that you have time to do your work, you get feedback from us, and you get feedback from the group. So, but if that's something you're interested in, look below in this podcast. You'll find a hyperlink to the I want to be on the waiting list. It'll open up a page that gives you the timing, the dates, the price for it. And again, only one person from your organization needs to register. And then once we're all set and we have the cohort together, we'll give you a passcode for the other person to join us. But it's so much fun working with someone from your own organization because you're like a team on this and you can have some great conversations and then take it out and share it with other people. So Ken, with that, let's wrap this one up and get ready to talk about the turn on our next one.
Looking forward to the turn.
All right.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.